Yeah, so the final week, we've covered a lot of material. We've really delved deep into a lot of Buddhist practices. So just to kind of round things up, as well as doing some practice, some meditation, and ending with a puja, which we'll introduce a bit later. I'm going to recap some of the things that we've covered for this series of Dharma Night lectures, the 4 myths of the spiritual life. It was a long time ago since I think it was me who gave the first talk, really exploring not any of the particular myths or this framework, which I'll introduce the framework in a minute, because I'm aware also some of you might not have tuned into the other talks. So I'll give us an overview. But first of all, to talk about why do we even need these frameworks? Why do we need these myths? Why do we need any myth? So maybe I'll just say the 4 myths. The 4 myths of the spiritual life. It's not a traditional Buddhist teaching, but it's a very, very helpful way of framing how we tend to view our practice. And so the 4 myths are development. Sometimes people call it transcendence. So development, the myth of development, the myth of surrender, the myth of discovery, and the myth of emergence. So these aren't myths as in Greek myths. They're not Eros and Psyche or Odysseus on his adventures. They're not that kind of myth. Nor are they the kind of myths. They're not like urban myths. They're not like the kind of myths that we need to dismiss because they're just incorrect. They're narratives that inform how we view our practice, or ways of describing how we view our practice. And the reason it's helpful, well, both to elucidate them, but also to bring them more and more into our spiritual lives as how we view things, is because we've got plenty of views already, and most of these views will not be helpful. So, views are much more than just opinions. They're sort of ingrained, tightly held frameworks which we don't even notice. And they cause us, they're caused by self-reference, they're caused by self-reference, they're caused by self-clinging, and views stop us, so this is what the Buddha taught and Buddhist teaching is, views stop us from developing spiritually. So unhelpful views stop us from developing spiritually. Helpful views help us develop. So we want to be able to see our views clearly in the Dharma life, in Buddhist life. We want to see our views clearly. We want to be able to see what's holding us back. Why do I get stuck on a certain thing? Why does this keep happening? Oh yeah, okay, so there's a view under there that if I do this, then this will happen. So very often, if we sort of keep getting stuck on something, or I just think even other people's behaviour. If we find we're getting, for example, you might sometimes find you get irritated with someone else, and usually there's a view there that they're not behaving that they should in the way that they should be. So we come across our views when the world is dissonant with our expectations. So our views are the way things should be. And when things don't go according to our kind of outline of life, then we can feel quite uncomfortable. Sometimes if it's around another person, there'll be some ill will or difficulty or something. It will look like, oh gosh, they should be doing this. They should be doing. Everybody knows this is the best way. And people offend our views. They offend our views, and we can take this as an opportunity rather than saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm really annoyed with this person. I'm not a very good Buddhist, whatever." We can just take this as an opportunity to be pleased actually that a view has been revealed, because whether that person or that thing or that situation arose or not, the view is chugging along, congealing even in fact, whether we know it or not. So this is one of the great things about Buddhism, is that difficulties can arise and they're taken as opportunities. So just to relish those difficulties and just see what views are challenged, what ideas about yourself or about how the world should be are challenged when something doesn't go your way. So yes, so views are delusions, wrong views. Wrong not as in immoral, but wrong as in incorrect. Wrong views are delusions, and they're tied up with craving, and they're tied up with aversion. And wrong views are very narrow. So Subhuti, teacher in Triratna, who many of you will know of, at least, if not know, Subhuti talks about wrong views being very narrow. They can't see the whole. It's not that they don't see the whole, it's just that they actually can't. Whereas right view as in a view that can see more than just the self-reference, more than this narrow outlook. Right view at its ultimate sees the whole, sees conditionality, sees other people, sees even at its highest that this idea about us and other people is even a false one, that can be transcended. So right view is expansive. It can take in much more than narrow sort of obsessional views, ideas. Okay. So and we will have we'll have myths in our lives anyway. We'll have views and we have myths. So why not embrace some, or in fact, in order to make progress, we'll need to be inviting in more helpful ways of looking at things. So these 4 myths of the spiritual life are ways of describing helpful attitudes to our practice. And to use the myths wisely, we need to remember that they're a metaphor. So they're a metaphor. In fact, most things are metaphors. The way we live is a metaphor. What we understand is actually a metaphor for something that's going on that's much harder to explain. So beneath the surface appearance of things, there's this big mystery of what's actually happening. And it's like the surface appearance of things is a metaphor for that mystery. And if we can use the metaphors that are helpful, then they'll take us closer to the mystery. They'll take us closer to a deeper understanding of life, or what life is, or what reality is. So we use these as metaphors, and to use them wisely, we use them actively. We use them sort of as a working thesis for our lives. We don't cling really tightly to them. We don't use them completely literally. The minute we start literalizing anything, we're sort of we're becoming ideological. We're becoming fixed in our understanding. We're putting a limit on ourselves. Yeah. So I'm going to hold up my little diagram, and I can get so these are the 4 myths. So we've got the 4 myths here. I'm just hoping that this is clear on the camera. We've got the 4 myths here: development or transcendence, and we've got surrender. We've got the myth of discovery. We've got the myth of emergence. And I'm just going to point out these 2 axes of this little chart. So we've got inner, outer, active, receptive. And I want to talk about those actually to start with before recapping a little bit about these. So perhaps I'm going to start with active and receptive. So these are two modes that we can think of in our practice, active and receptive. So just can't hold that up the whole time, but I'll get it out in a minute. Yeah, so an active attitude to our spiritual life is very like it's using our will, it's using energy, it's making progress step by step. It's having a clear idea of where you're going and making effort in order to go there. And you might think of it as striving, and it's taking responsibility and saying, okay, no one in the world apart from me can make my spiritual progress for me, so I'm going to look at what I need to do and make these steps. And so that's very broadly. And then for instance, on a sort of micro level in meditation, like we were just doing there, it might be that time to use an active mentality is if you're really vague or you're really sleepy, and you're okay, I need some clarity here, and I need to be very deliberate about what I'm doing. I'm going to really pay attention to the next breath. I'm really going to look at what's happening. So bringing an active attitude to meditation as well. It's curious, it's exploratory, it's energetic. And then the receptive mode is perhaps a bit more subtle. A receptive mode is kind of saying, well, everything's actually happening already. Life is going on. Everything's happening already. I just need to notice it. I just need to understand it. I need to feel what impact life is having on me. I need to make myself available to the teachings, for example. So listening, a really good example of being receptive is just listening very, very attentively, very, very unpreoccupied by other thoughts, just kind of absorbing. Or it might be to use the meditation metaphor again, for mindfulness of breathing. It's just, you notice, the breath is just happening. Yeah, it just happens. I don't need to do anything, and I can just feel those sensations, and I can just watch it happen. Just kind of very, very relaxing, taking a back step. And there's this nice Indian set of images to describe the active and receptive. So, it can be, you might think of it as self-power and other power. That's another way of thinking about it. So the active, we've got a baby monkey. So how does a monkey carry its baby? Well, the baby clings to the mother's back. So the baby monkey is using its own efforts to stay attached to its mother. Yeah, its little hands and little legs are holding on tightly. And then the receptive mode is I was just trying to think of the phrase, rather than its own efforts, is allowing other to carry us, allowing other to carry us. And the image is how a mother cat carries a kitten, is the kitten goes all floppy and the mother cat carries it in its mouth. So that's the more receptive, that's other power, letting things carry us in the spiritual life, and letting the rhythm of the breath bear us, letting the momentum of our practice kind of take us. So that's active and receptive. So we've got development is active, and that's very clear, isn't it? That the myth of development will be taking responsibility. It's very much, the myth of development is very much following a path. And the path is such a strong metaphor in Buddhism. The Buddha talked about it. The Noble Eightfold Path is one of the first things that he taught. And he talks also about, he was a person who discovered an ancient path, an ancient track. The track was already there. He rediscovered it. It was overgrown. He cut the weeds down, and others couldn't follow it. So the path, we talk a lot in Buddhism about the path, and that's very much developmental. And we talk about the path of regular steps. So taking one step at a time, moving towards our aims, and receptive. We looked after the developmental model. We looked at the path of surrender. Sorry, not the path, or just self-surrender. It doesn't have to be a path. A different metaphor. Both surrender. Sorry, what I should have said is active. We've got development, and we've got discovery. I'll do it in that order actually. So discovery is when we take actively analysing, examining our experience, the very building blocks of our experience, the nature of our experience, and we're using. I don't know if you were there, but Sabhajamati was guiding us through meditating on the lakshanas, so looking at impermanence, insubstantiality, and dukkha. That's one example of discovery. Very, very often it's an analytical way of examining our experience. And the receptive, we have surrender. So very much like the kitten being carried by its mother. Surrendering, we both need to surrender our will, and we need to surrender to something else, which I'll talk about a little bit, perhaps a little bit more in a minute. And then also receptive, we've got emergence. Emergence is allowing, a sense of allowing something to happen. We don't need to interfere. I was thinking about, I don't know if any of you ever grow anything. When I grow anything, like plant a seed, for example, and it actually grows. Doesn't happen every time I try and grow things, but if it actually does grow, I feel so terribly proud, like I invented the whole process of growing, like I designed this thing called a seed, which has got all this potential, and this seed is going to, grow into this flower, for example. It's very satisfying, but I have to admit that it's got fairly much nothing to do with me, with the process of growing. Emergence is a little bit like that. And I'm just going to briefly say something about inner and outer. So we've got these two down the side, and this really relates to where we view ourselves in relation to the Buddha. So these four myths are closing the gap between us, unenlightened human beings, and the Buddha as potential for all of us. These four myths are closing the gap. That's if they're working well, they're closing the gap. And whether we think of that Buddhahood, that attainment, so to speak, as something that we move towards, or something that is outside of us, that we either move towards in the case of development. So in the myth of self-development, we're where we are. Enlightenment, Buddhahood is somewhere way over there. We're just going to do whatever we need to do to get there. Yeah, we're going to work. We're going to take one step at a time to get there. So that's the Buddha is outside, and we move towards it by being active. And in surrender, the Buddha is outside, or Buddhahood, or is outside, and we outside of us, and we are allowing it in. We're opening up to it. So particularly in practices where we're visualizing perhaps a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, or sometimes even meta's got that quality. We've got a feeling that metta is happening outside of us, and we're allowing it in. So that's that's the Buddhahood is outside of us, and we're allowing it in. And then this inner dimension of practice. This is where we was a very, we talked about this with Jnanavaccha, a very heartening sort of sense of that the potential for Buddhahood is within us all. It's somewhere there to be found somehow, and we can either use an active attitude to discover what is it that we need to let go of, what's holding us back, what views are in the way, what can we let go of, and that's the active way of working with this sense of that Buddhism is, and to say that all of these are as true in a way as one another. None of these myths is more true than another. None of the myths are better than one another. So Buddhism, the Buddha is somehow to be discovered within our own beings, within our own selves, within our own lives. So we can discover that, or the receptive way of encountering that is to let it emerge. That there's somewhere, and in some traditions this is also true, that we're Buddhas already. We just need to kind of let that flower, like my plants that I just need to leave alone, and occasionally water. It's nothing to do with me, actually, just letting that sense of mystery to emerge within our experience. So all of these myths, because they're metaphors, and because we're using our minds and the constructs that our minds need to create, to understand, they've got inner, they've got outer, they might have a sense of time or space and moving towards, allowing. And as we get close, as the myths start to work more strongly, or to perhaps say that, to emphasize that these are really just metaphors. So it's not true that the Buddha is outside of us and we have to let the Buddha in. It's true enough for now, but there is actually no us, and there is no Buddha. It's not separate. So all of these myths will have to. Our teacher Sangharakshita says we will have to confront the dualism of our understanding in any of these ways of looking. These ways of looking have both subject and object, which is helpful, whether we think that that's inside or outside, whether we think that Buddhahood is within us. There's still this sense of subject and object, and that will have to be blown apart as we go more deeply into our spiritual lives. So all of these myths have got, we keep talking about this, a front and a back. So I'm going to round off in a minute. But they've all got they've got really positive aspects to them. But they also can, if we only rely on one myth, then we won't have we're in danger of getting a little bit distorted. Our spiritual lives might not be so complete. So we can use the myths to support the other myths. So if we really have a strong sense that the myth of surrender is very, very, very devotional, very, very aware of the Buddha being outside, and that we can respond, be receptive to the grace actually of the Buddha or Bodhisattvas. But we might, the danger there is that we just become kind of, idol worshippers, or sort of, and we never really think that we can move towards Buddhahood, and we might become sort of gullible, or like God worshippers or something. But we can bring to bear one of the other myths to counter that. That actually we do have our own potential within us as well. We do have ability to be active and make progress in that way. Yeah. So I think I'm going to leave it there in a way, because we've gone into quite a lot of detail over the series, and to get into the fronts and the backs, so to speak, the positives and the bits that won't quite work in each of the myths. I really suggest that you watch the other talks if you haven't done already. So yeah, watch the talks, and I think what we're going to do now, sorry, I've just slightly lost my way. Let me just pause a minute. Well, I think just what's really interesting for each of us as Buddhist practitioners to notice where our tendencies are, how we already view our Buddhist life, whether we think of we're in touch with that sense of it being within, or if we really are striving and along the path. That would be and just notice where the different frameworks touch our practice, and you might have experienced little glimpses of some of the others, even if they're not your main one. Okay, so very shortly we're going to have a break, and then as Kashamitra said, we're going to have some more meditation. We're going to have some time for some questions about practice. So in the break, do think about, are there any questions you want to ask us about these myths, or how to apply them particularly in your practice. And the myths are applicable in meditation, but they're also more broadly how you interact in the Sangha, what your friendships are like, how you respond to study. All of these things are incorporated in these myths. So yeah, have a think, final chance we'll try to respond, and then Akashamitra is about to come and mention some things.
Thanks, Kusalasara. Yeah, great. I really enjoyed that little summary, actually. I thought it was brilliant. It's really good because there's so much. Well, we have talked about these myths in so many different ways over the previous weeks, and there's so much in all of that. I think it was great just to have it kind of condensed and just to have that kind of very clear summing up from you. And I really appreciated. I'm quite visual with how I organise material in my mind as well, so I thought that diagram was really helpful as well, so thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to say a couple of things. So the first thing I just want to say about something that's coming up over the next, it's starting soon actually, and that is the spring retreat. So we've got an online spring retreat which is coming up, and that's going to be from the 1st to the 5th of April. So probably some of you that are watching will have done a real, not real, one's not more real than the other, will have done an in-person retreat at some stage, and a lot of you will have probably done one of our online retreats. So you'll know how valuable these retreats can be. So even if you're at home, which you will be with an online retreat, it's a chance to just put a pause on what you're doing the rest of the time. You can take some time off work, you can try and have a bit more space, and there'll be meditation, there'll be yoga, there'll be teaching. And one of the advantages of an online retreat as opposed to an in-person retreat is if you do an in-person retreat, which they seem like a distant memory now, but they'll be back with us before we know it, which I'm looking forward to. But one of the things about an online retreat is that you can do the retreat and you don't have to completely put everything down if that's not available to you. So for example, if you have children, you could do the retreat and just tune into whatever you can, or if you're not able to take time off work, you could still do that. But if you do want to do the retreat completely as a retreat and just, and switch your phone off and unplug from all your emails and that sort of thing, you can completely do that as well. So it's very flexible. And however much you do, I think it's very, very valuable just to have a little bit more intensity of engagement. And like I said, there'll be like morning meditations, there'll be groups where you can connect with other people, and yoga and talks in the evening and that sort of thing. So I really recommend this retreat, the spring retreat. It's the 1st to the 5th of April. And Britta's put a link in the chat to how you can sign up. And it's free to sign up, basically. We run these online retreats on what's called a dana basis, which we just rely on your generosity. So we will ask you for a donation, but that can be as much or as little as you want to give. And you sign up completely for free. Great, and then the next thing I want to say is I always feel a bit sort of cheesy saying this, but if you do like our videos, please like and subscribe. If you can share these videos, it's very, very helpful for us, basically. We're trying to build our YouTube presence. And partly why we're doing that is we're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. Because if we do that, it makes certain things easy for us, like we can have a donate button on the page and those sorts of things. We're just trying to build our online presence and our YouTube channel. So please, if you tune in regularly, or even if you're just tuning in tonight and you've enjoyed what you've seen, if you can subscribe, that's very helpful. And also if you can share talks that you like, on your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever it is. It's really, really good. We just want to reach as many people as possible, basically. I think what we're doing here is very needed, and I know from talking to lots of people that they find it very helpful. So it's very, very good just to share that, really. I was just thinking a bit, listening to Kusalasara, I was listening to her, and it was kind of prompting some reflections in my mind about, why do we need the 4 myths? Why do we need the 4 myths? Why do we need these different Buddhist texts? Why do we need the path of regular steps? Why do we need the 4 noble truths? Why do we need all of them, in a sense? Why? And I don't know. No, not really. We need different ways of approaching things, don't we? That's what our minds need. It's not enough to just say, okay, well, look, here are, for example, because you could say something like, okay, look, here's the 10 precepts. You need to practice ethics, and here are 2 meditation practices, and you need to practice meditation, and that's it. Just do that, and we'll keep talking about the precepts, and we'll keep talking about meditation. And in a way, theoretically, that would be enough. But it's not really enough to do that, I think. Human beings are very complex, aren't we? And we need different ways of approaching things at different times. And I think what these myths show us as well is that even within that particular teaching, we'll need one of them will be relevant for us at a particular time. So we need different ways of conceptualizing things, and we need to, well, I certainly myself, I've been involved with Triratna for like many years. I think about 20 something years now, and I keep coming back to different ways of looking at the Dharma, and there are certain teachings that I keep coming back to time and time again, and I approach them from different ways. And then sometimes even when I hear something new, I find it very, very helpful in order to, it's like fuel for my practice really. If we're to keep doing this, for however long we do it, we need fuel, and we need something that's going to motivate us and inspire us. And what I really love about the London Buddhist Centre is that it provides us with that. It gives so many different kinds of people a way in. It's like what we offer here is there will be something that everybody can relate to. And we explore things from different ways, and we make it very, very easy for anyone to engage at any level for any amount of time. And I think that's the thing that I like about the London Buddhist Centre most, is you can just come for an online class and that's totally fine. You can come along and get more involved and kind of make a commitment and help out with classes, and that's fine for however long you want to do that with. Some people choose to live here. Some people like myself and Kusalasara have chosen to dedicate our lives to Buddhist practice, and that's also fine. And it's like there are so many different, in my mind it's almost like this kind of like organism where things come and they go for periods of time, and it all gives life to this entity that is the London Buddhist Centre. And I really, really appreciate that there's not one way of doing things, and it's not that we want people to do something in a particular way. It's like if you come along and you engage, however you engage is fine for however long you engage. And I really, really appreciate that. So I want this entity to be able to reach as many people as possible. So one of the way that the London Buddhist Centre runs is on generosity, basically. So all of these different people that come, and however they engage for however long, they're encouraged to give something for what they've received. And that's what we're asking you to do, is if you give something, like you could give a donation for this class this evening, or if you've enjoyed this series, you could give a donation, or you could set up a monthly donation of, say, £20 or £30 or £40 or whatever. That's the other thing, is however you engage is fine, and whatever you give is also fine. So both of those things together, I think, are great. It's not like we ask you for a particular subscription. It's like whatever you want to give is fine. And if you can give, it would be lovely if you do give, because that will mean that we can reach more people, basically. So please give us a donation if you're able to do that, and that means we'll be able to reach more people in the months and weeks and years to come.